Everyone in the small town of Willow Creek admired Eleanor Harris. She was gentle, patient, and kind to everyone she met. For more than 40 years, she had lived in the same modest house at the corner of Oak Street, where roses bloomed every spring and wind chimes sang softly in the evening breeze. But behind the quiet walls of that house lived a pain no one ever saw. Eleanor's only daughter, Melissa, had not always been cruel. When Melissa was a child, she used to cling to her mother's hand, laugh loudly, and run into Eleanor's arms whenever she felt scared. Eleanor had raised her alone after her husband died in an accident when Melissa was only 5. She worked long hours as a seamstress, often sewing late into the night, her fingers aching, but her heart full of hope for her daughter's future. "I'll do anything for you," Eleanor used to whisper as she tucked Melissa into bed, and she truly meant it. As Melissa grew older, something began to change. In her teenage years, she became distant, sharp words replacing soft laughter. Eleanor blamed it on growing up, on the confusion of youth. She ignored the way Melissa rolled her eyes when spoken to, the way she sighed whenever Eleanor asked a simple question. By the time Melissa reached her mid-20s, the cruelty had fully surfaced. She had moved back into Eleanor's house after losing a job in the city. At first, Eleanor felt grateful to have her daughter close again. She cooked her favorite meals, cleaned her room, and even gave her the little savings she had kept for emergencies. But Melissa never said thank you. Instead, she complained. "This food is tasteless," she would say, pushing her plate away. "Why is the house so old? It's embarrassing," she snapped. "You're always in my way," she muttered whenever Eleanor tried to help. The words cut deeper than any knife. Still, Eleanor remained silent. She told herself that Melissa was stressed, disappointed with life, hurting in her own way. A mother's love, she believed, meant enduring everything. One winter evening, Eleanor slipped on the icy steps outside the house and fell hard. The pain in her hip was unbearable. A neighbor rushed her to the hospital, where the doctor said she needed rest and support for several weeks. When Melissa arrived at the hospital, she looked annoyed rather than worried. "Do you know how inconvenient this is for me?" she said, arms crossed. "I have my own life." Eleanor forced a weak smile. "I'm sorry," she whispered. At home, things grew worse. Melissa hated caring for her mother. She complained about cooking, about helping Eleanor walk, about the medical bills. "You're ruining my future," Melissa shouted one night. "If you hadn't been so weak, I wouldn't be stuck here." Eleanor cried silently in her room, pressing her face into her pillow so Melissa wouldn't hear. She wondered when her daughter had stopped seeing her as a mother and started seeing her as a burden. Months passed. Eleanor slowly recovered, but something inside her broke beyond healing. One afternoon, Melissa found a letter on the dining table. The house was unusually quiet. The letter read, "My dear Melissa, I know I was never perfect, but I loved you with everything I had. I see now that my presence only brings you anger and pain. I don't want to be the reason you feel trapped. I have decided to leave this house and stay at a care home where I won't trouble you anymore. I hope one day you remember me not as a burden, but as the woman who gave you her entire life. With love, Mother." Melissa laughed bitterly. "Drama," she said to herself. But when evening came and Eleanor didn't return, the laughter faded. Days turned into weeks. The house felt empty, too empty. Melissa realized there was no warm meal waiting for her, no quiet footsteps at night, no gentle voice asking if she had eaten. The silence screamed louder than any argument. One evening, while searching through old drawers, Melissa found a small box filled with memories. Her childhood drawings, school certificates, photos of Eleanor holding her proudly at every stage of life. At the bottom of the box was a notebook. It was Eleanor's diary. Page after page spoke of sacrifice, worry, and unconditional love. Melissa yelled at me today. One entry read, "It hurt, but maybe she had a bad day. I hope tomorrow is better for her." Another page said, "I sold my wedding ring today to pay Melissa's rent. She doesn't know. She doesn't need to." Melissa's hands began to shake. For the first time, she saw the truth, not the version she had created, but the reality of a mother who had given everything and asked for nothing. Guilt crashed into her chest like a storm. She rushed to the care home the next morning. Eleanor sat by a window, staring at the garden outside. She looked smaller, older, and heartbreakingly tired. "Mom," Melissa whispered. Eleanor turned, surprised. Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. "I was cruel," Melissa said, her voice breaking. "I hurt you when you loved me the most. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm sorry." For a long moment, Eleanor stayed silent. Then she reached out her trembling hand. "I never stopped loving you," she said softly. "But love should never destroy the one who gives it." Melissa fell to her knees, sobbing. The cruelty had cost her years of warmth, years of kindness, but not everything. Some wounds heal slowly. Some scars remain forever. But that day, Melissa learned a lesson too late for comfort, yet just in time for change. The deepest cruelty is often shown to those who love us the most, and regret always arrives when love is gone. Melissa stayed at the care home longer than she had planned that day. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and jasmine flowers from the garden outside. Eleanor sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, as if afraid to say the wrong thing and push her daughter away again. For the first time in years, Melissa noticed how thin her mother had become. The strong woman who once worked day and night now looked fragile, almost breakable. That realization hurt more than any angry word ever could. "Why didn't you tell me how much you were hurting?" Melissa asked softly. Eleanor gave a tired smile. "A mother doesn't complain," she replied. "She endures." Those words stayed with Melissa long after she left. That night, Melissa returned to the old house on Oak Street. The silence felt heavier than before. She walked into the kitchen and stood there, staring at the empty stove. Memories flooded her mind. Her mother humming while cooking, calling her name gently, waiting for her to come home. For the first time, Melissa cooked a simple meal herself. She burned the rice, spilled the soup, and nearly cried from frustration. Suddenly, she understood how much effort Eleanor had put into the smallest things, things Melissa had never appreciated. Days turned into weeks. Melissa began visiting the care home every evening. At first, Eleanor seemed cautious, unsure whether this kindness would last. But Melissa kept coming, bringing fruits, books, and sometimes just sitting beside her mother in silence. "I used to think caring was weakness," Melissa confessed one evening. "I thought kindness meant losing control." Eleanor looked at her thoughtfully. "Kindness is strength. Cruelty is easier. Anyone can be cruel." Melissa lowered her head, ashamed. Slowly, Eleanor's health began to improve, not because of medicine alone, but because loneliness had finally loosened its grip. Laughter returned in small moments. They shared tea by the window. Melissa brushed her mother's hair, just like Eleanor had done for her when she was a child. But not everyone believed in Melissa's change. An old neighbor once said, "People don't change that easily." Melissa heard those words and accepted them as punishment. She knew forgiveness was not something she could demand, it was something she had to earn, day by day. One afternoon, Eleanor surprised her. "I want to go home," Eleanor said quietly. Melissa froze.
"Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't want to hurt you again." Eleanor placed her hand over Melissa's. "We will hurt each other sometimes," she said. "That's life. But love means choosing not to walk away." They returned to the house on Oak Street together. Melissa cleaned every corner, repaired the broken fence, and planted new roses in the garden. She began working again, saving money, not for herself, but to make sure her mother would never feel like a burden again. Still, guilt followed her like a shadow. One night, Melissa broke down. "I can't erase what I did," she cried. "I was cruel when you were helpless." Eleanor hugged her tightly. "Scars remind us where we've been," she said. "They don't have to decide where we're going." Years later, people in Willow Creek noticed a change. They saw Melissa walking slowly beside her mother, holding her arm carefully. They saw patience in her eyes where anger once lived. And when Eleanor passed away peacefully one autumn morning, Melissa stayed by her side, holding her hand until the very end. At the funeral, Melissa spoke through tears. "My mother taught me love by surviving my cruelty. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the second chance she gave me." Some lessons come late. Some forgiveness comes quietly. But love, real love, sometimes survives even the cruelest hearts. After Eleanor's funeral, the house on Oak Street felt different. It was no longer just quiet, it was hollow. Melissa stayed alone in the house that night. The rooms felt larger without her mother's soft presence. Every object seemed to whisper Eleanor's name. The worn-out sofa where she used to rest, the kitchen clock she never fixed, the roses outside that still bloomed faithfully every spring. Melissa sat on the floor of her mother's room and cried until her chest ached. "I'm here now," she whispered into the silence. "Why did you have to leave now?" But life never answers such questions. Days passed. People returned to their routines. Sympathy faded. But Melissa's guilt did not. She quit her job for a while and avoided friends. Every time she closed her eyes, memories returned, not the good ones first, but the cruel ones. Her sharp words, her cold looks, her anger when Eleanor needed her most. One evening, while cleaning the attic, Melissa found something she had never seen before: a sealed envelope. Her name was written on it in Eleanor's familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, Melissa opened it. Inside was a letter and a legal document. The letter read, "My dearest Melissa, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. I want you to know something important. I never blamed you. I knew you were lost, not evil. Pain often makes people cruel, and love sometimes becomes the easiest target. I have left this house in your name, not because you owe me kindness, but because I believe you can become better than the person you once were. Please live a life where no one feels like a burden in your presence. That will be enough for me. Forever your mother, Eleanor." Melissa collapsed to the floor. Even in death, her mother was protecting her. That night, Melissa made a promise, not to Eleanor's memory, but to herself. She sold the house, not because she wanted to escape, but because she wanted to transform pain into purpose. With the money, Melissa opened a small care center in Willow Creek,
It wasn't fancy, just clean rooms, warm meals, and something far more important: kindness. She named it Eleanor's home. At first, people were surprised. "The same Melissa?" they whispered. "The cruel daughter?" Melissa heard them. She accepted it. Every morning, she helped elderly residents walk, listened to their stories, held their hands when loneliness struck. She treated them the way she should have treated her mother from the beginning. Some nights, she cried alone. Redemption did not erase regret, but it gave it meaning. Years later, a young woman once asked her, "Why do you do all this?" Melissa smiled sadly. "Because I learned too late," she replied, "and I don't want anyone else to learn the same way." On the anniversary of Eleanor's death, Melissa placed fresh roses by a small photograph in the care center hallway. "I wasn't a good daughter," she whispered, "but I'm trying to be a better human." And somewhere beyond pain and time, love rested quietly, finally at peace. Because the cruel daughter had learned the hardest truth of all. The people who love us the most deserve our kindness first, not our apologies last.